Welcome to Determine Out Loud, our podcast series that's all about minding your business in contract management and source to pay. And now, your host, Buyers Meeting Point owner, Kelly Varner.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest episode of Determine Out Loud. Today, my guest is Anthony Mignogna, director at Source One, a Corcentric company. Welcome, Anthony.
Hey, Kelly. Thanks for having me.
So when you and I had connected to plan out this discussion, one of the things that we instantly connected on is this idea that there's what people talk about at procurement conferences, in blogs, what they write about in white papers, and then somewhere off in the distance, there's the very real daily challenges of what procurement professionals are actually doing. So for instance, I think the most common examples of this break is as many times as you hear people talk or write about AI and blockchain, whether in keynotes or panels or white papers, in reality, instead of dealing with AI and blockchain, most procurement teams are actually struggling to gain visibility into their spend, manage their suppliers to get total value, build credibility with the C-suite and internal stakeholders. In other words, they're still trying to nail out general best practices. So if you would start us off today, just by talking a little bit about the importance of, being interested in new developments, but never forgetting the importance of investing in strong procurement fundamentals.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's funny if you go to like a conference and you look at the agenda, you think that 80% of procurement organizations are working on RPA and AI and blockchain, and then when you actually go to the networking sessions and you talk about what people are investing in, where they're at, where they're trying to go, it's very much earlier in the in the journey and the maturity curve of procurement, right? Gaining visibility in the spend, implementing P2P. I think spend under management is a great kind of all-encompassing metric for procurement. But then everybody's got different definitions of that, right?
Sure.
Is spend under management, it went through a PO, or is spend under management contracted? I think really what you're looking at when you say spend under management, it's, how much of my spend is addressable, and of that spend that is addressable, how much is my procurement strategically sourcing and then operationally managing, right? And that looks a little bit different for each organization, and the way that each organization is going to get to that is a little bit different. But talking about AI and blockchain before you've kind of got that piece under control is a little bit of a cart before the horse type situation.
Absolutely. And actually, as you had pointed out, every team and every organization is different. And so it would be very easy to attend one of these conferences and walk away thinking, geez, we've never talked about blockchain once. We must really be out of alignment with where everybody is. When in fact, just because that's what's being talked about up on stage doesn't mean that's what's being talked about in any of the conference rooms of your peers, of suppliers up and down the supply chain, of comparably sized and comparably mature companies. So what it really comes down to is knowing your situation, whether that happens to be fully understanding your company's definition of spend under management, as you mentioned, or fully understanding what your company can do to bring that spend under procurement's control. When you talk to different teams in procurement, how would you get a sense of if you were talking to a team that really was in touch with who they are, what they're good at, what they need to be focused on, versus a team that's maybe a little bit too focused on what's happening inside of other companies' conference rooms?
Yeah, I don't think any CPO has kind of the mandate of your goal is to implement AI, right? AI is kind of a means to an end, right? You talk about target business outcomes, at a high level, drive efficiencies, drive cost reduction, right? Reduce risk, those types of things. When you have a well-oiled machine that's kind of, already hit the low-hanging fruit of, automating some processes and sourcing and category management, aggregating spend, volumes, consolidating suppliers, those types of things, then you can really start talking about the use cases where AI can come into play. right? But going from, right now we're manual and spreadsheets, so we want to buy some AI now, right? There's too big of a bridge to build there, and there's a lot of fundamentals that you can implement more quickly, more easily, and ultimately organizations can have a better appetite for that, right? For just sourcing through a process, aggregating volumes, consolidating spend, et cetera. And then you can kind of build towards AI, right? I think of it kind of like like fitness, right? If you've never really worked out before, you're not going to look at a bodybuilding magazine. You kind of got to start before that, right? Work your way up there before you get to the cutting edge approach, right?
Because aptly, if you make the mistake of trying to go too far, too heavy, too fast, you're going to do more damage than good, right? Is sort of the takeaway there.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have the fundamentals in place. You don't have the foundation, right, on which to build. So AI is kind of predicated on having some sort of processes and technology in place. So if you try to jump there without the, those things already kind of in place and within the organization, you're often going to end up biting off more than you can chew. And you've got a change management problem that's going to stretch the project out, and ultimately, people are going to get burned out about it, and you're going to end up where you started with a lot of time wasted and failures in between, and value not realized, right? There's a lot of value to be driven from procurement, and it's not dependent on implementing blockchain.
Right.
When you get to that point where you're at the cutting edge and you've got to find incremental value after you've hit all the levers, then yeah, blockchain's a thing, right? But there's a lot of value to be had on the way there that if you're not kind of seeing the forest through the trees, you're not going to capture it when you're trying to advance too quickly.
Absolutely. And actually, I think it works if we stay with your analogy of fitness to move on to the next topic. I think one of the reasons that it would appeal to someone to look at a fitness magazine is it's sort of this goal of where you're headed, right? It might be far off and it might not be 100% attainable, but it's very exciting, right? You look in this and you say, here's an Olympic weightlifter. Look at what they can do. And then you move your tablet or your laptop aside and you look at that little 5-pound weight sitting ready for you to use. And it's kind of like, it doesn't have the excitement. It might be what you need, but it feels like maybe there's a boundary push missing. So for teams that need to invest in their fundamentals, as you had said before, in order to reach that point of being a well-oiled machine, how can you both make sure that you have strong fundamentals without letting go of, forcing yourself to stick to the basics? So how can you really do a good job of nailing all the things that absolutely have to be done while continuing to make sure that your organization becomes more mature, that skill sets are altered as the team progresses, that technologies are switched in or switched out, or information sources are available as the team maybe gets into more mature or more strategic spend? How can you stay in touch with making sure you have a strong core, but also try to advance your team forward?
Yeah, it's a good question, and continuing with that analogy, right? You can make a plan, right, that gets you. If you kind of back up to your ultimate end state, you create a roadmap to get there, right? And there's incremental successes along the way, and there's incremental steps, milestones, toll gates. You need to figure out where you need to start, right? Some organizations, you talk about spend visibility. Some organizations have the spend but can't get to it. Some organizations don't even have it, right? So, those are two very different problems that you need to solve for, right? And then you get into sourcing. Well, do you have a really good sourcing process and buy-in from the organization and control of the spend, and you're just trying to drive efficiencies? Or do you still need to get your hands on the spend without it, throughout a more kind of decentralized organization, and you have to go through a centralization process first, right? So you really have to build that roadmap and understand the different milestones, the different toll gates, and the incremental successes that you can drive and the value associated with them to ultimately advance to that point. And depending on your organization, best in class maybe doesn't need to be the ultimate goal, right? Not everybody needs to be the world-class athlete of procurement, right? Because the organization doesn't warrant it, the spend doesn't warrant it, et cetera. Right. So really knowing what that target end state is, and building that roadmap, and then you can layer in, what do I need to do from a people standpoint? What do I need to do from a process standpoint? What do I need to do from a technology standpoint? What is the role of procurement within my organization, and how am I going to measure whether or not we've been successful?
Absolutely. And again, to that point, not talking about AI and blockchain doesn't mean not talking about technology. Obviously, today, anything that any group of people tries to accomplish in an enterprise requires enabling technology. So what role would you say technology plays in, let's say, a realistic environment driven by a focus on procurement fundamentals, but for a team that has that plan, has that roadmap, and knows that they're working towards something bigger? Where does the technology piece fit in?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think technology is an enabler, right? I think technology is very much not a magic bullet that is going to do all of those things. It's going to enable all of those things, right? So you still need to set the goals, set the roadmap, and set the plan, and technology is going to help enable that. It provides, if we just look at sourcing, for example, I think was the topic of today, it provides visibility, right, into the sourcing process. It helps drive efficiencies. Driving those efficiencies helps drive effectiveness. You can get to more spend sooner. You can increase competition because the additional suppliers is not as much incremental time and those types of things. So, technology is truly an enabler of that roadmap, of that plan. Mm-hmm. And without it, you can still accomplish a plan just much more inefficiently and maybe not as effectively. But without the roadmap and the people that process the other components, the technology is also going to fall flat. So they really all have to work in concert, with technology being that kind of key enabler and accelerator of the value of the results.
Absolutely. And maybe step one, as I believe one of the gym brands like to say, is forego the judgment, right? If you're at the conference and everybody is, whiz-bang AI and woo-wee blockchain, and that's not where your company is, it doesn't mean your team is in the wrong place. It just potentially means you're in a different place on your journey. But if you're trying to, lift the Olympic weights without mastering every single step in the plan on the journey that leads you up to that point, you're not going to make the progress that your team ultimately needs to deliver to the bottom line of the company.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's not right or wrong. It's just where you are, right? And it's just different. It's different for every organization. And then, I think that goal setting is a key step. And again, right, your goal is not, we want to get to the point where we can implement AI. Your goal is, we need to be more efficient. We need to be more effective. We need to, have more spend under management. We need to, do a better job of mitigating risk or driving cost reduction. And again, those goals are going to vary organization to organization, and they're going to be prioritized differently based on the market and industry and those types of things. But, being realistic as to where you are as a procurement organization, being realistic as to where you want to be, mm-hmm. and where you can realistically get to in 12, 24, 36 months is kind of the key to that planning. And then everything else is just what are the steps in between.
Absolutely. Anthony, thank you so much for joining me today to share your point of view on this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. And be sure to look out for our next episode of Determine Out Loud.